Hey everyone, and welcome to A Balanced Life with Dr. Jacquie here at Black Star Network. And as we are moving into this month, we're really being able to see and identify how do we want to become our best selves. At our last show, we talked a lot about what it means to really build and balance the broken pieces of our lives. How do we pick them up and put ourselves back together again? And today we're going to talk about generational curses. Now, I have to tell you, generational curses are often seen in the African American community, but to be quite honest, they are no respecter of race, color, creed, age, or size. And as we begin to dive into our conversation today, I want you to think about some of those things that you may have heard about family members, things that you have seen. And, we often talk about see something, say something, and we often keep silent because we really don't know who's going to believe us. Many of us in our communities are well aware of the dangers of generational curses. And today we kind of want to unpack that and really discover what it looks like to move ourselves forward. We are joined today by three of our favorites, Dr. Tierney, Stacey Owens, and Dr. Terry Whitt-Bailey. Welcome in, ladies.
Thank you.
Yes. Hey, Dr. J.
I am so excited that you all are here to unpack this particular subject that often plagues us. And I can recall watching movies, and there was always like this hush in the room. And, we really weren't trying to know what was going on, but we could tell something was going on. And then when we began to gather for family reunions and special times and vacations, we would hear things like, don't let your kids go in the back room. Uncle so-and-so is there. Or keep your kids close to you. Don't let them sit on someone else's lap. There are all of these ways in which we were kind of brought into understanding generational curses, but not really knowing the impact. Let's talk for just a moment. I'm going to start with Dr. Whitt-Bailey. Let's talk for a little bit about how can we identify from a family perspective what a generational curse may look like. Dr. Whitt-Bailey.
Wow, this is such a deep subject that we won't be able to unpack all of that in this 1 hour. I can tell you that for sure. But I think one of the ways that we can start to discover how we don't talk about it is by noticing when we stop talking, or noticing when we start to whisper, or noticing when everyone looks a certain direction, or when someone says, oh, well, we don't talk about that. That's kind of the key. We don't talk about that. Well, why not? And so I think our generation says things like that, but the younger generations now start to ask that question, well, why not? And so then we have to make a decision on whether or not and how we unpack that with folks. But yes, we are very good at not talking about things. I'm one of those people, very good at just not talking about it and making it hush hush and or whispering about it or not talking about it in the room when everyone is there, but talking about it inside conversations. So it is something that is still happening in times right now.
Absolutely. And not all generational curses are predatorial when you think about it. I'll give a life example and then I'm going to ask Stacy to jump in because I recall my grandfather saying, I'll be happy when you stop bringing these strays home. And it took me till I was like in my 20s to really understand what that meant. I thought he was talking about another family member. And then later on, I found out that my mother married into a family. So I was like adopted. And it was the first time that it struck me that I was being called a stray. And so oftentimes there are things that happen on in our families that we don't really discuss and they trigger us and we have to heal from them. Stacey, when you deal with kids or, when you're working with families and adults, there are so many ways that generational curses show up in behavior. How do you help others and yourself? Tell us about being able to identify what generational curses look like.
That identification piece is challenging because you have some things that are just plain sight. It doesn't always have to be a negative thing, but if your family is dealing with like drinking alcohol, you have alcoholics in your family, and it's just something, it's as simple as that. Could have been something that happened with your ancestors that was, a bad experience. They started drinking behind it. And then the next generation saw the impact of the drinking that it had on that generation. And then they started dealing with their problems by drinking. I think I've had an opportunity to see that here with the school, with some of our families when students are showing signs of anxiety or showing signs of mistrust. And then when I'm having to have that conversation with the parent, you start hearing them sharing stories about the things that happened to them that caused them not to trust people or cause them to have that same thing that their child is dealing with. And it's so ironic. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had a family sitting in here, and as I was listening to the child explain her feelings about the things that she was dealing with, and when what the mom in to bring an awareness to her, she started telling me about her stories when she was little, and they were verbatim, like the fears that she had already begun to project those fears onto her child. Unbeknowingly. I mean, she wasn't even doing it intentionally. It was just, she was in her mind protecting her child. But in fact, she was teaching her and passing down those same fears, that same anxiety that she, developed from when this bad decision was made from the generation before her. She was assuming that by talking about it and preparing her daughter for it, that she was protecting her. But what she was doing, in fact, is projecting those same emotions into her daughter. So her daughter was starting to think and feel the same way. And so I think it's sometimes hard. Like I said, alcoholism, that's the easy thing. But emotional abuse, that's something that's not in plain sight that you can say, I can connect that to a generation. So I think we have to listen. We have to listen to the stories that our parents tell us. We have to listen to what the generations before us is saying, and then make intentional connections to see, is this something that we've heard in our family tree before? And if it is, then when do we start doing something different?
That makes perfectly good sense because being able to identify what's happening is important, but also making certain that you're not projecting while protecting because more is caught than taught. Children feed off of, and other adults in our spaces too, they feed off our behavior and our actions and emotions. I remember watching one comedian and no one was doing anything, but all of a sudden people started running in a direction and people were like, oh, wait, they're running, let me run too. And sometimes we have that type of feeling in ourselves that, oh, this must be what I should do. And no one's having a conversation about it. Dr. Tierney, talk to us about what it looks like. Stacey said something about things being in plain sight. And there are those things that are right in front of our face. And then those other things that are nuanced and hidden. How do we help people in those spaces and circumstances?
Absolutely. So it's for that reason that I like to use the term generational patterns. Okay. Because often when we say generational curses, we think, just like Stacey said, we think of the things that's in plain sight. We think of the abuses. We think of alcoholism. We think about things like that. But when we say generational pattern, okay, This means that you handle your money the way that mama handled her money, the way that grandmama handled her money. This means that you respond or don't respond to conflict the way your mom responded or didn't respond to conflict, and so forth and so on. It takes it out of this lexicon of it being something that's serious, dramatic, or abuse, and then it puts it into a space to say, okay, what are the patterns that I have in my life that I can trace them back to my predecessors, that it was their patterns too. And then you can begin asking yourself the question of, do I like this pattern? Is this a pattern that's serving me well? For example, I had a client once that was so stressed out because of all the things that she was doing to take care of her family. And so when I asked her, well, sugar, why are you doing it that way? Or why aren't you getting help or getting an in-home, nurse aide? Well, because mama didn't have one. She took care of Big Mama herself, and then Big Mama didn't have one. Okay, well, baby, Big Mama wasn't a judge. Big Mama did not have the career that you have or the responsibilities that you have. So you're not getting the help that you need based on your life right now because of a generational pattern. And she felt guilty and shameful of accepting and receiving and asking for help because her predecessors didn't ask for help because that was the pattern. So she was stressing herself out all because of a generational pattern that she couldn't see. So when we look at things from that standpoint of a generational pattern, then it's easier for us to really start really examining what's going on here and inviting someone to that space. If my client and I were not having that conversation, she would have never been able to identify the pattern. When you are in the pattern, it's hard to see the pattern. This is why it's so important that you have a coach, a therapist, someone to walk with you in these spaces to be able to say, hey, you can do that a different way. There's a different habit or pattern to go about getting this thing done. You don't have to be stuck in the same pattern. So that's one of the things in thinking about how do we face, address, and really heal these different generational curses or generational patterns. It's about recognizing it for what it is and then inviting the right people in to help you see what you can't see.
I think that what you said is one of the ways to begin to help people discover a way of coping. And oftentimes that coping is positive and it's negative. I want to do a round robin again, and I'm going to start with Stacy. If you had to talk to someone or tell them one thing, what would you say about beginning to cope with the things that you begin to identify and see? Stacy?
I think you have to cope by first self-reflecting. Like, you need to be thinking about what are the decisions that you're making. Because the healing begins with you. So if you can start self-reflecting, being honest with yourself about the decisions that you're making, and then connecting some of the decisions, if you can, to those patterns that Dr. Tierney just finished talking about, if you can do that, that helps you to increase your awareness of where you need to start with your change.
Absolutely. Dr. Bailey?
That is so solid. I mean, I can't say it any better. Many times we want to point a finger at someone else, but I've been told that when you point one finger at someone else, you've got three pointing back at you. So it's important to make sure that, yes, that some things have been triggered or there's been some generational patterns. And I love that term pattern, but what is your role in it now? How is it affecting you? And then how can you make that change? Or how can I need to speak for myself? How can I make that change? And one of the other things that I've learned also is that it's important to just do one step at a time, to do one thing at a time, not to think that, life is going to change for you immediately or overnight, but to be able to have the recognition of it, to know where it might have come from, and to know your role and responsibility of growing through it and growing beyond it.
Absolutely. Dr. Tierney?
Know that it's okay to do something different. When we're talking about generational patterns, oftentimes we get locked into those patterns because we don't want anyone to say, oh, you acting brand new, or you doing something different from how this is how we always did it. It's okay to do something different in order to get the results that you want to see in your life.
Thank you for sharing. When we come back after the break, let's talk a little bit more about what it means, not only just to cope, but are you being heard and are you being seen when we're back after the break?
Folks, Black Star Network is is.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Welcome back, everyone. As you can tell, generational curses, generational patterns, these cycles of life that are all throughout our community from age to age to age, we get into that space of oftentimes doing something I can't say that is necessarily healthy, is when we begin to say, oh, I'm not taking my children to this event, or we're not going to go to this family function. We begin to check out and remove people. And then all of a sudden, there's no more communication. There's no more family. There's no more recognition of what family used to look like, no resemblance of it at all. But that's because oftentimes in our families, we're not heard. We're also not seen. The other side to that is we're also not believed. I want to talk about that for a moment, because making change, oftentimes being able to stand up for yourself, that's what it means, being able to have a voice. But, you know, it's oftentimes not what you say, but how you say it and who you say it to. Stacey, let's talk about that for a moment, because there are times when people have done their self-reflection and they've identified what it is they need to do, but they don't know who to say it to. And because that relationship may have a little bit of tension, how do you then begin to set the tone for having open and honest dialogue? Stacey?
You know, I'm gonna be transparent in this moment. I'm gonna take one of my things that I had to come into self-awareness about, something that was a generational pattern for me, and that was anxiety. And I was like, why is it every time I'm embarking upon something new in my life, why does this anxiety take me over such to the point where it can, it's still such a fear where I'll actually become frozen and not do anything. And then I started paying attention to the conversations that my mother was having and all the things that happened with her and when she was younger, and how she lost her mother at a very early age when she was about 9 months old. And she has some patterns that showed anxiety within her. And once I started noticing how this was passed down, I started trying to have the conversation with her about changing, your thought patterns, changing the way that we communicate things. And I'll use, for lack of a better word, the analogy of it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, right? So I found when I was trying to have these conversations that sometimes it could hit a sore spot, especially if it's something that hasn't been healed through her. Mm-hmm. And out of respect, I'm like, I don't want to bring pain. I don't want to re-dig up pain for her. She wasn't seeing it the way that I was seeing it. And I didn't want it to continue to cause us to bump heads. So I had to come to that space of saying, all right, I recognized it. I shared it. Now I'm only responsible for how I allow this process to impact me. Mm-hmm. And so now I had to say, I love my mother to death. I'm still very actively involved with her. I would never just disconnect from her. But it was certain pieces that I had to let go. I had to let go and then just say, well, now as we interact, recognize when my anxiety is being set off and what am I going to do different from that. And then I had to come to that realization that, Lord, I done passed this to my daughter because she's sitting over there having anxiety. Thankfully, she's in therapy now and it has helped her. But I had to go to her and now have a conversation with her as a 27-year-old to say, this is passed down from tree to tree, limb to limb. What can we do differently? So now we're making sure that we've created spaces for my granddaughter so that we're not putting her in a position where she's continuing to operate out of anxiety and fear. So I think you're only responsible for you and the change that you can do. You got to have the tough conversation. You got to bring the awareness, but I wouldn't let it tear you apart. You know, don't give up on the person. Always do it with love.
Always do it with love. Man, loving the unlovable. That is so hard to do. Dr. Tierney, jump in this conversation and share with us about that, you know, in that sense of how can we be seen and heard and relax our anger and bitterness in order to be able to have the right style of conversation.
I think what Stacey said is perfect. It is absolutely perfect. It's exactly what I've had to do in my own life and what I coach my clients to do. You are only responsible for your own actions. Okay. So the one thing that I tell my clients when we're dealing with a situation like this, you can't make the other person understand, apologize, or anything like that. This is where forgiveness is so critical. It's so critical because a lot of times where the anger and the frustration and all of that comes from and the bitterness, it comes because you are holding something against that person. You know, regardless of what it is, regardless of what they did, regardless if it's just the fact that they didn't tell you what you thought or teach you what you thought they should have. Most of the time, it's coming from a place of unforgiveness. And we are holding that person in unforgiveness, thinking that if we don't forgive them, if we don't release them, you know, from the bondage of our unforgiveness, then they're going to do it again. They have to pay. They owe something. And when I say forgiveness, I'm not speaking about indifference. I'm not speaking about, because we do that a lot. We'll say, I forget, I ain't worried about them. I ain't studying them. But will you, give them help if they need it? If the answer is no, then you haven't forgiven. Okay. I'm talking about that true forgiveness where you say, you know what, mom, dad, sister, you did the best that you could. I know that you gave me everything that you had in your power. Now it's up to me to change the trajectory of my life, of my children's life, of children's children. And letting that forgiveness take its place so that we can truly heal and move on, not just as an individual, but as a family and as a community as well.
So as a family and as a community, oftentimes there are responsibilities that we have in the realm of see something, say something. And because we are in so many spaces and places, it literally crosses over. I want to talk to Dr. Whit-Bailey about this for a moment, then bring in Stacey as we talk about workplace behavior, because oftentimes some of the things that are happening to us generationally show up in how we communicate and talk to other people and treat people in the office space. Dr. Whit-Bailey.
Wow, you just keep hitting it hard. You're hitting it hard today. I had an opportunity to see a production of The Bodyguard, the musical, over the weekend. And one of the songs that the lead person, who was Whitney Houston, sang was from a song called The Greatest. And there's a line in that song that says, learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. And in the workplace, or in the home, in personal relationships, sometimes you can see when people don't love themselves, because when they don't love themselves, they tend to react or act out what they're not getting. And so what I see sometimes in the workplace are people that are short-tempered with each other, or I may see people that are trying to become more of a leader, being in charge or being bossy about things, because maybe at home they don't get the opportunity to have leadership opportunities or the opportunity to be heard. And so knowing how to help people to love themselves as a manager or vice president in my organization is important. So being able, in my case, being able to connect with my staff to help them to know that I love them. I really do. I love them. And so how do I help them to become better employees? By showing them that I care, by showing them that I'm listening to them, by giving them the space and the time that they need, but still holding them accountable for the work that needs to be done and how they interact with each other in getting that work done. But yes, it bleeds over into what's happening at work. But learning to love yourself, and I'm still learning that, I'm still learning that. Learning to love myself is the greatest love of all. So that when I do that, then I can emit that kind of love in the workplace.
Absolutely. I can see the value in everything that you've stated. And for our audience who's watching, oftentimes we don't know how to approach people because people can be unapproachable because they have generational curses. They have these generational patterns. And sometimes it's not easy. Stacey, talk to us a moment about that. How are you helping? And I know you wrote this amazing book about creating these safe workspaces. How did this crossover happen, and what do employers do when they see it occurring?
Create the space for the conversation. I just had this happen, like literally, just the other day, where one of my employees came in, and I'm an advocate for the T. That's knowing your triggers, your emotions, and how you normally react. And I constantly tell my staff, don't labor in your emotions. Like, don't come in here and pretend like you feel in some way and you're really not feeling that way. And so this particular employee walked into my office and she said, listen, there's somebody on staff that's triggering me. And she knew exactly the act that was, that this person was doing that was causing her trigger. And basically with the other person, they were very dominant. It was the dominant personality, very controlling, that leadership piece, somebody who want to be a leader and don't maybe know the effective way of how to be a leader. So they're just walking into the classroom, taking over. And they're like, and I just feel like my boundaries have been crossed. And so first, because she felt comfortable to come in and say, here's my trigger. Here's my emotional feeling that I'm getting from it. This is how I normally would react. And her normal reaction was, I withdraw and I don't say anything and I just get angry with the person. And so I had to say, all right, so what can we do to self-regulate? How can we change that normal reaction? So that you withdraw and this person have you withdrawn, but you're angry. So does the person know how you feel? And it was like, no. So we had to talk through, how can we set a boundary for that person? Because first, nobody can interact with you and deal with you if you don't tell them what they're interacting and dealing with. This person is crossing into your classroom, causing this mayhem. You need to establish the fact that that's not how we're going to operate within our group norms. So we have to be willing to confront. We have to confront the situation. And, I believe confronting does not have to be negative. Confronting is just letting the other person know and then setting that boundary and then expectation. We owe that to each other first, because if the person is not aware of what they're doing to you, how can they change? So when they was like, well, I tried that, or I thought I tried that, maybe I wasn't clear. Well, then let's talk about how you can clear it up. But you have to be the one to go do it. I can go do it, but then I'm creating a boundary for me. I need you to hold that person accountable for how you want them to interact with you.
I'm going to hold that thought till we come back after the break, because I'm listening to what you're saying and people's feelings oftentimes get dismissed. When we come back after the break, let's continue to talk about having these courageous conversations. We'll be back after the break.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Welcome back, everyone. As you can tell, there are certain spaces and times to have these levels and layers of conversation, things that impact us, things that we're just beginning to realize, ways in which we can move ourselves seamlessly forward without being disruptive to the spaces where we are, but also protecting our peace in the process. I want to invite Stacey back in for a moment because she hit on something about feelings and emotions and triggers. And there are those times where you can say something to someone like a Stacey or a Dr. Tierney or a Dr. Whit Bailey, and then all of a sudden you blowing this out of proportion, or girl, that's not real, or why you always think that way. Help us figure out how to deal with when we're being dismissed, when we're trying to have honest, courageous conversation. Stacey.
See, that's the thing. I'm trying to get you out your emotion. You got to understand the emotion that you're feeling, and you got to understand the emotion that your desired emotion that you want to feel. But I don't want you to operate out of your emotions. Meaning, I want you to clearly know what is the expectation that you have from that person. So when I go and I tell you, this is how I feel and this is what I need, right? I want the focus to be on the need, so that you can't say you don't know what I am needing from you. So now if you dismiss my feelings, I'm not operating from my feelings. I don't care if you agree with how I feel about it or not. But did you do what I said I needed you to do in order for us to be able to operate together? So we got to get out of the emotional space. I want to honor the emotions, because your emotion affects your physical, right? Your emotional state affects the way that you're going to be operating in the world. But you need to be aware of that, and you need to know how to regulate your emotions so that nobody can control your emotions. I'm going to always be in control of my emotions, whether you dismiss them or not. But I'm also going to clearly tell you what I need from you in terms of the boundary that I'm setting or the expectation that I'm having, so we can focus on that part. I don't need you to hug me. I just need you to respect the boundary that I'm about to put in place for you.
That makes perfectly good sense. I want to invite Dr. Tierney in, because we're in that space where there are going to be times, where you just cannot help saying something because stuff just flies out of people's mouth unknowingly, not realizing the damage that they're doing to the other person who's really trying to bare their soul and clear the air so that they can heal and move on. Talk to us about that, Dr. Tierney.
So this is why it's important that you talk to the right person. You're talking to the right people, because there's no way I'm going to bring my luggage of stuff, because we all got luggage, thing. And I open my luggage and I show you all of my undies and all of my intimates, and then you laugh at them. Or you say, oh, girl, that's nothing. You have to make sure that you are in the right spaces, the safe spaces that we were talking about earlier. Just because someone has a title of mom, sister, friend, just because you've known them for a really long time doesn't mean that that's the right person that you need to talk to. So the first is to really identify who is my person that I can talk to about this. Okay. I have friends that some friends I can talk about certain things. Some other friends talk about other things. As a business owner, I have friends that I can talk business stuff with. I have other friends that we can't really talk about that because you're not necessarily in that space. So identifying who your person is for you to be able to talk to, that lessens the likelihood that they're going to shut you down or add another piece in your luggage that you're already carrying. The other thing that I always say here when we're talking about unpacking, different things, and I want to pick up what Stacey was talking about, identifying what you feel. I have a wheel of emotion that I will show my clients, because a lot of times, we're having the feels, but we don't quite know what we're feeling. So even if I ask my clients sometimes, what are you feeling? Well, I just, and it's like, I'm just angry. Because we really haven't tapped into to identify for ourselves what it is that we're feeling. Oftentimes, fear and sadness will mask as anger. We're not always walking around here angry. Sometimes we're sad. Sometimes we are terrified. So making sure that you have identified what you feel and then unpack that feeling to identify why you're feeling that will then inform you on what you need to do. And when you have that information, you can better communicate to the other person where you need their help in this, or what it is that they can help to serve you in this space to help you as you heal. But if you don't know that, then we're all just throwing things against the wall to see sticks. Only you have that information. When you also have that information, it'll better tell you who to take your bag to and who you can really unpack it with. But making sure that you absolutely have that information is critical.
Absolutely. Dr. Whit Bailey, what do you say about all of this? I mean, you are working in organizations, you're working in your company and with the company. How do you engage people, or how do you prepare yourself to be the sounding board or the listener when people bring things to you? Because oftentimes we're not ready when people want to unpack their stuff to us.
Well, I think that what Dr. Tierney says is correct. People have to know who it's safe to bring your baggage to. And yes, we all do have baggage. We all have baggage. but everybody isn't going to be able to receive and respond to the baggage that you bring to the table, or that you bring to the office, or that you bring to a person. And so in my case, I'm that person for a lot of folks, because I can respond in a way that connects to emotion. And so I love Stacy, and I love how she shares things. But I am that person that likes to understand the emotion, and the person that wants to be able to share my emotion. I think that being able to have an understanding of what you're feeling, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, whether it's just being tired, whether it's joy, knowing what those things are and why you have those feelings is important, because then you can connect those to the person that you're interacting with. If there's some type of response that's happened, being able to pull someone in and allow them to know that they're in a safe space to talk about it, a safe space to just continue to talk until they figure out what it is that's going on. Because again, as Dr. Tierney says, sometimes people say that they're tired, but they're really angry, or say that they're frustrated and they're really jealous. And so how do we just help people to continue to talk until they figure it out? And I do that sometimes driving in the car. Sometimes I talk out loud just to try to get things out in the open, and no one else is in the car with me. And so it helps me to just think through things out loud, because sometimes you just need to be able to do that. We have emotions and emotional baggage that is carried with us, and how we decide to unpack it and to whom we decide to unpack it is very important.
Let's talk about that for a moment, Dr. Whit Bailey, because oftentimes when employers hear what a person is going through, there's a tendency to either label or judge. How do you help employers or bosses or middle managers stay out of the judgment and labeling zone, and then using that against a person when it comes time for evaluation? Because that's when people literally like, I'm not talking to y'all because it's going to be held against me. And so people often remain silent, yet hurting.
Yes, I think modeling it is going to be very important for leaders to be able to do. So people being able to model, in my faith, I want to make sure that I am as open and as inviting and as forgiving as I can be when people are sharing their information. They've come into my office, the door is closed, and they expect me to have a level of confidentiality and a level of trustworthiness when they are sharing what they're sharing. Otherwise, they wouldn't share it. And so being able to open that, again, unpack that bag little bits at a time. There's some people that are just going to share it all. They're just going to throw it all out there at you. But being able to have a sense of calmness, a sense of, I'm not going to say the word right, but receiving the information in a way that is not judgmental. Because I don't want anybody to judge me. I beat myself up enough. We beat ourselves up enough. Why would we want to beat someone else up about what they're trying to share to get the answers, or share to be able to be a better worker, or to be a better wife or a mother, or just a better person in general? Now, I don't have all the answers, but it's important for me to be a good listener. And we should not be connecting those things to the job description if it's something that's personal. If it is something that can help them to work better, then again, in love, with kindness, with sensitivity, sharing those things that can help people to be better workers, but not holding it against them as they are figuring it out throughout their work life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Dr. Tierney, you mentioned something about generational patterns, and when people work together in teams, and I know students who watch us don't like working in groups or having lab partners and all of those things together, because sometimes there is a lack of trust because of things that they have experienced. And when people either sit too close to them, or they're in their personal space, or they may raise their voice because they are anxious about the way someone is handling something. How are you helping people begin to mitigate or lessen the nuances of a trigger when they're in the group or team dynamic?
Mm-hmm. So in working with teams, the thing I always say is your team or your relationship or your group is only as strong as its weakest link. So each of you have to look at yourself to say, okay, what am I bringing to this team? It's easy to sit back and say, well, I don't want to work with them. I don't want to do that. And I can say that because I'm an only child. And so I was that partner that was like, I'll do all the work. Don't worry about it. I got it. Because I want to make sure my grade, is good. But I had to recognize, hey, that is a tendency that's come from the fact that you're an only child. So you really didn't learn how to play well with people all the time because your cousins went home at the end of the day. You're able to put your toys back exactly how you wanted them. So I had to look at myself. And that's what I encourage teams to do. Take a look at yourself. Take a look at what you're bringing to this team and be honest about it. Be honest about it. So what Dr. Terry was just saying about how employers should just really move with sympathy, compassion. Well, ask yourself, are you giving yourself that sympathy? Are you giving yourself that compassion? What is it how are you handling you? Because that's going to dictate how you handle other people. So I had to recognize this is how you handle yourself, Tierney. So this is how you're showing up in the team. And so that's really the number one thing in working with teams and helping teams really get their team dynamic together. It's helping the individuals first see themselves before then they start picking at the teams. If we're all coming together, and this again can be group settings, professional relationships, whatever it is, if we're coming to this group as a whole person, then the whole group will win. A high tide raises all boats. So the entire group, and if I'm coming and bringing my best self to this group instead of trying to pick the group apart.
So before you go, what tip would you give to our audience in order to be able to seen, heard, or move forward?
To be seen, heard, and move forward, again, the work starts with you. It starts with you. I would ask you, do you see you? Do you listen to you? How are you trying to move you forward? And let that be your first beacon, because everything else will fall into place from that. Be it if the relationships or the partnerships or whatever it is, those relationships start to better because you have now impacted them in a way, or if it's that we need to put a little distance and a little separation, there. But it all starts with you.
Dr. Whit Bailey.
Yes. As Dr. Tierney said, how am I handling me is an important question to ask, especially in a group setting. As a leader, I don't always have it right and always have it together. I've been the weakest link as a leader. And those people who have been on the show, have watched the show in previous episodes, know that I lost my husband about this time last year. And I was the weakest link. Emotionally, I wasn't together. And I needed the team to pick me up and to carry me forward, to understand that it was going to be okay, because I've told them that. And so again, having that trust as a team to know when it's time to pick up and to pull along and to push and to listen are things that are going to be very important to make that change or to get the job done.
Absolutely. When we come back after the break, let's wrap this up with a little bow and see how can we not only claim our baggage, but release it as well when we're back after the break.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And as you can tell, generational curses are something that plague many families. Now, I will say that not everybody has something in their past or some skeleton hanging out in their closet. And thankfully, that's a good thing. But for those who do, there's a time where you have to really say, I'm going to be the one to release our family from this. I'm going to be the one to claim all our baggage and set my people free. I'm going to be the one. And perhaps you have heard that you're the person who you really believe can stop and make change in your family. So ladies, let's talk about that for a moment, because there are two things. There's the claiming of the baggage, and then there's the releasing of the baggage. And all of them are a process. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Whit Bailey. How do you claim and have ownership over the things that you have now identified and recognized, and you know it's time to say, we're going to lay this thing to rest once and for all?
You know, one of the simple things, it sounds simple, but for me, it was really a profound thing, was to look at myself in the mirror, to literally look at myself in the mirror and know that God made me, to know that all the bumps and the curves and the crevices and the lines and everything is, and the skin tone and the hair, God did this. And I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And so my shape may not look like someone else's. My skin color may not look like someone else's. My hair texture may not look like someone else's. And so to be put into a box that generationally or traditionally may say that you're a certain type of person because you look a certain way or you respond a certain way, I had to let go of that. And that is something that I have started to do. And it's not a vain thing at all, but to really take the time to look in the mirror and say, thank you, God, for making me who I am. Thank you for giving me what you have given me that you haven't given anyone else. Thank you for the bumps and the crevices and the pain and all of the stuff that you've done to help me to be who I am. The hurts and the developments and the connections and the friendships and the loves, how you have put all of those pieces together to make me unique so that I can give to someone else and move someone else because of what you've done for me.
Absolutely. Dr. Tierney.
So I like that you use the word claim, because oftentimes in the Black community, we'll quickly say, we ain't going to claim that. We're not going to claim that. We're not, when maybe times it is some things we do need to claim, sugar. Something that I always tell my clients, I always say, when we're looking at who we are, and I love what Dr. Bailey just said, when we're looking at who we are, one of the things that we'll do, we'll pick ourselves apart. And we only want to claim those things that are quote unquote good. Okay. But when God created everything from the moon and the stars to the fish and the fowl, he said it was good. When he created it was good. So those characteristics and all of the different gifts and talents and quirks and all of the things that are unique to us in the way that God created us, it is good. Now, we can use them in ways that are not good. Use myself as an example. That friend that when my friends would always say, hey, get on the phone, pretend like you're me and call the phone company, and because they're messing up my bill. And by the time I got done talking, this mouth right here, you had a free phone, I had a free phone, they had free minutes, and we in a cell phone bill for the next 3 months, Now, my gift and my talent in my mouth and the power of my mouth, I did not understand it back then. So I used it in a way that was not good. I used it to tear some things down. I used it to cut some things up because I didn't understand who God was creating me to be in. I didn't know that my mouth was the very thing that he wanted to use right now as I'm talking to you to help build up. So when we're thinking about the things that we're claiming, let's not be so quick to just say, I'm not claiming that. Let's really look at it and say, you know what? This is who I am. These are the gifts and the talent that God gave me. I may not have understood them fully, so I used them in the way that was not so good. And I have to own that too, because I am not the sum total of my mistakes. All mistakes are going to work together ultimately for my good. But if we're not claiming it and we're just trying to sweep it under the rug, we won't ever get to that point to understand all of the things that make us as wonderful as we are. So that's the main thing in claiming your bags. It's really truly them and knowing that all of it works together.
I like what both of you have stated because it gets us to that understanding that there's a process to all of this. Oftentimes we say relax, relate, release, relax, relate, release, exhale, woosah, do all of these things, but yet we don't put in motion the words that we're saying. Relax, so that you can identify and understand what is going on. Relate to what it is that you need to face and begin to deal with it. Then release yourself from it once you figure out what's my part and what's someone else's part. Let's unpack that for just a moment in the time that we have left, because how do you divvy up what's my part and what's someone else's part when, as Dr. Whit Bailey says, somebody's always pointing fingers and wanting to pass the bucket or blame and nobody wants to take it? Dr. Whit Bailey.
Well, yeah, no one wants to take it, but we have to take it. And we have to know that we have baggage. In fact, we have luggage. We have more than one bag. I was thinking about this and I said, sometimes we have a paper bag and sometimes we have a Birkin bag, but it's still a bag and it still has stuff in it. And we have to decide how much we're going to share and what we take out that will help to heal us, but what could help to heal others, whether it's one person that's a personal relationship, whether it's a team of people on the job, whether it's a family connected to some type of, as Dr. Tierney says, generational pattern. So what is it that we need to claim in terms of all of our luggage? And what is it that we need to share, that we need to bring out and expose individually and collectively?
Dr. Tierney.
So definitely we can't make anybody else claim their bag. Okay. Just like if you go to the airport and you can see somebody's bag going round and round a carousel, and until they decide that they want to pick it up and pick up their bag and unpack their bag, we cannot force them to unpack their bag. So let's make sure that we're not getting all the feels about somebody else unwillingness to unpack their bag. Okay. That's what you can do. Actually, if you try to start, this your bag, pick up your bag, see what's in your bag. That's the number one way to really shut down any positive communication and healing from that point. It really is about this is where I wish our resident theologian was here with us, Pastor JT, because this is also where that prayer piece comes in. This is where you say, okay, well, Lord, I'm going to do my part. And part of my part is praying for them, get out, not trying to force them, not trying to shame them into claiming their bag or anything like that. But let me just pray for them. Because ultimately this is oftentimes work here that has to work on the inside for someone to be able to see themselves, to see the situation, and to truly have that change in heart posture, even for ourselves. I can't change me. No good is my husband, but the Holy Spirit can. So this is where we have to then say part of our work and part of making sure that understanding what it is that we need to relax, relate, and release is prayer piece to pray for ourselves and for others.
Thank you. So as we close out this block, give our audience a challenge. Dr. Whit Bailey, what would you challenge them to do, being able to move forward? You mentioned historically, traditionally, generationally, there are some things that we need to do. What would you challenge them to do to begin to seek out the best of what's next so that we don't move forward things that we know we need to leave behind?
The first thing I would say, take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath and know that you may not be able to change everything. You may not be able to change anything, but you can come to whatever the situation is with yourself, with your genuine self, with what you know and what you have. But take a deep breath and know that you can stand up tall and try to make an adjustment in you. Sometimes you have to separate from others, and that may be important to do that. And by doing that, people will recognize that you're trying to do something different. You're trying to break the pattern for yourself, for your family members, for your workplace. But take a deep breath. And it sounds trivial, But sometimes by taking that deep breath, it'll give you additional clarity that you need. It'll allow you to connect with the Holy Spirit, and then it will allow you to figure out what it is that you can do for that next step moving forward.
Absolutely. Dr. Tierney, your challenge to our audience.
I want to challenge you to claim your bag. Truly claim your bag. Take a look at what's in your bag, to know what's in your bag for yourself, not necessarily to reveal it to anyone else. Really claim your bag and then make a decision on how you want to move forward. I challenge you to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing these tips and this wisdom. I'll give my reflection when we're back after the break.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And as you can tell, there is so much to unpack, so much to learn, so much to do. But this is your season. I believe that we are all in a season of transition to be able to open our eyes and to see what's right in front of us. No longer are we silent when we see the proverbial elephant in the room. We're in this space and in this time in our lives where we can speak our truth. We can share it with individuals who will understand and identify and move us toward the resources that we need in order to get the help that is required. I hope that we have said something today will allow you to not only claim your bag, but unpack that bag and release yourself from its contents, that you too can live a balanced life. Thanks for watching. Bye now.